Welcome to Homeward. I'm Jim Burns, and this is another Just Jim podcast. For some reason, when we do these things, the Just Jim podcast, our numbers get higher. So my producer, Mike, keeps telling me, do more of these. I love doing the Homeward podcast because we are absolutely committed to interviewing the finest parent, family, and marriage experts in the world. But ever so often, we're going to do these Just Jim podcasts. This is a really important subject to me. Very personal, very important. When a loved one strays from faith and what to do about it. I bet every one of us have somebody in our world where a loved one has kind of strayed from faith. Today, people call it deconstruction. Well, in recent years, there's been a significant explosion of young adults distancing themselves from the church. And sometimes these young adults are moving into like even middle school and high school. So it's a big deal as they distance themselves from the church and really traditional faith and traditional values. It's leaving many parents and their loved ones heartbroken and confused. So, like I said, many of them call it deconstruction. Interesting, 6 years ago, I wrote a book called Doing Life with Your Adult Children, Keep Your Mouth Shut and Welcome That Out. Seems like we talk about it all the time here on the podcast. And, it's still a bestseller on Amazon. It's amazing. But you know what? I only devoted 6 pages to people leaving faith, young adults leaving faith, basically. But this issue has prompted the most questions and concern than all the other issues combined. I never dreamed when I wrote that book that I would spend the rest of my life answering questions every day on the issues that so commonly are called deconstruction of faith, but that's what I do. Here are 3 issues from last week. How do I positively influence my child who doesn't believe in God anymore? And, this is written by a heartbroken mom. My son and his wife forbid me to talk about God to my grandchildren. When they stayed with us last weekend, we were told we could not take them to church. Again, heartbreak like crazy. How do I continue to love my daughter who was a youth leader at our church, and now she's constantly talking trash on the church and seems to have violated every moral and value we have taught her. So again, these are coming with people who have heartbreak and confusion and shame and grief, and sometimes blaming themselves for their loved ones wandering. In fact, sometimes, almost all the time, they're blaming themselves for their loved ones who are wandering from the Christian roots. Deconstruction. Okay. Deconstruction, what is it? Well, at its simplest form, deconstruction is kind of like a death of a person's belief in God, or belief at least in the church. And when someone is deconstructing, it affects them, but also it affects all those around them who still believe. I love what C.S. Lewis once said. The greatest thing to remember is that though our feelings come and go, God's love for us does not. He's not wearied by our sins or our indifference, and therefore is quite relentless in his determination that we shall be cured of those sins at whatever cost to us and whatever cost to him. So in other words, his relentless love means so much. In that book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, again, I said I did 6 pages on it, but what I talked about was what I called the anatomy of a lost faith. Sometimes we say the anatomy of an atrophied faith. So the first one is neglect. So when young people get to a place and they just start neglecting their faith, maybe they quit going to church, they quit reading the Bible, they're not in any kind of fellowship, they don't hear the word of God because they're not in church, they don't worship God, they don't pray as much, they just neglect. That doesn't mean that they're not Christians. It just simply means that they're not flexing their muscle, right? Quickly, they move from neglect to drift. That's number 2. My dad was a farmer. And he was actually a farmer before I was born, so I only know farm stories. I never lived on a farm. In fact, I tried to milk a cow once, and the milk got all over my face and body, and everybody just laughed. I think I was in 9th grade, and we were back at the farm, and they said, here, this will be fun. Let's make fun of Jim. That's what they did. But anyway, what he always told me was that cows grazing on grass, they just kind of go from patch to patch. They keep their head down. They never look up. They're not paying attention. And when they do look up, they're lost. So this is kind of a great illustration of what takes place with a lot of young people. They don't mean to. They just sort of drift, and then they look up one day and they're sort of lost, which goes to number 3 in this anatomy of a lost faith. Then they have unbelief or lack of trust. Now they're not flexing their faith muscles. Now unbelief creeps in, and perhaps actually even compromising values and morals. Okay, so that's number 3. And once you get there, you move to disobedience. Now, disobedience is the natural outgrowth of the first 3. I mean, this could be the first visible sign you see in rebellion. You know, Jesus made a remarkable statement about this, and it was recorded in John 14:21. Whoever has my commands and keeps or obeys them is the one who loves me. And the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. Or in other words, some versions say, reveal myself to them. So what that means is that if you don't obey God, then sometimes you won't sense God, you won't see God, but through obedience, you show love. And what happens? God reveals himself to them. So they're not seeing God. They're not experiencing God. They then move to kind of an insensitivity to God. Okay, so they're disobeying, so now they move to insensitivity. And the Bible calls this dull of hearing, okay? And when you're insensitive to God, the natural response is to kind of harden your heart toward the Lord and his will for your life. And that's what happens with a lot of these people who are in that process of deconstructing. Number 6 is they forfeit their spiritual purpose. They forfeit their spiritual purpose. And in this final stage of losing or dropping faith, we tend to live with the consequences of our choices by forfeiting God's presence and purpose in our life. And that's what you see happening with a lot of people. I'm not even saying they're not Christian at this point. I'm just simply saying they're forfeiting their spiritual purpose. So, what's the answer to reaching a person who is deconstructing or who's kind of gone through that deconstruction process? By the way, it's a process, and it takes all kinds of turns and shifts and up and down and all around. So don't think it always is exactly what I just explained to you, but it's kind of that way. So, incredible thinker in another century summarized what I think we need to do and be for this generation. An incredible thinker from the last generation said this, and I think it's what we need to do and what we need to be for this generation. She said, we do not draw people to Christ by loudly discrediting what they believe, by telling them how wrong they are and how right we are, but by showing them as a light that is so lovely that they will, with all their hearts, want to know the source of it. Isn't that a great concept? And of course, that's what we want to do. So you don't win an argument with someone who's deconstructing. You love them, and you love them toward change by consistently caring for them, even when they're making poor choices, and consistently making your life a light that shines bright for them. So here's what you got to do. No matter what they're doing, no matter where they're going, don't preach, don't lecture, don't be a punk about it. Just simply stay in their story. That's it. Jesus always led with love, and that's what we're called to do. So who are these, what we'll call wanderers, okay? Although every person who wanders away has a unique story about straying from faith, I think David Kinnaman categorizes what he calls the dropouts into 3 different groups, and I really like how he did this. David Kinnaman is the president of the Barna Group here in California. So the nomads are on a slow fade. That's the first one from active faith. They have strayed. They most likely do not go to church on a regular basis. They would still maybe consider themselves Christians and call themselves Christians. Sometimes nomads pick and choose what scriptures in the Bible they will follow, but they're in that process. They're just sort of lost out there and kind of wandering. The second word he uses is prodigals, and this is what the Christian church has used. And I don't even like the word all that well, but the prodigals no longer describe themselves as Christians, okay? And this person has been what we'll call deconverted. They would label themselves either as atheists or agnostics. On the other hand, some leave faith because of moral conflicts. So Tom was a worship leader who moved in with his girlfriend right after getting his master's degree. And during those last years in grad school, he was living kind of a dual life. He was torn between his Christian faith and a lifestyle that went against biblical teaching. So he was partying on Saturday night and he was leading worship on Sunday morning. Yeah, that does happen. Hopefully not at your church, but it does happen. Well, he came to a moral crisis and he only had 2 decisions. He would either return to living out his faith or he would change his beliefs to match his behaviors. That's what people do. I love this quote. Whenever beliefs don't match behaviors, people change their beliefs to match their behaviors. That's what Tom did. Or to put it another way, whenever morals do not match actual behavior, then people modify their morality to accommodate their behavior. So like I said, that was Tom's story. He chose to quit believing and he left his faith behind. Now, there are millions of other adults, and a lot of times young adults, who have done the same thing. So that's the prodigal. The third one is exiles. Now, they still believe in Jesus, but for some reason they feel alienated from the church. They feel torn between the real world culture and the church. And as they enter adulthood, they didn't feel at home in the church, but they didn't also want to leave it either. Now, many of the exiles, they want the best of both worlds. They're skeptical of institutions, but they aren't fully disengaged with them. And I described exiles as having one foot inside the church, one foot outside the church, okay? And one exile I know confessed to me that he felt like an outsider looking in when he came to church anymore. He said, I want to belong. I want to join in, but something holds me back. Now, for him, it was an addiction to pornography. For others, it's a lot of other things. Okay. So look, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. When we come back, I'm actually going to share one of the most popular parables of Jesus, and I think it relates totally to deconstruction. We'll be right back. I'm Jim Burns. You're listening to a Just Jim podcast, and we're talking about when a loved one strays from faith and what to do about it. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
We're here tonight at the Lion Air Museum in Orange County. And the reason I'm so excited about this venue, besides the fact that it's beautiful, it represents why we're here tonight. Just like this place has the Great Plains, but that airport has the latest. We've got 40 years of tried and true biblical foundational equipment and resources to help families, pointing us towards the future. So super excited about Homeward, what God's going to do. So stay tuned as we honor 40 years, but look forward to the future of what's coming.
Moving forward, while the future of Homeward is incredible, we are looking to provide help and hope in every chapter of your family story, knowing that every family has a family story and it's a little bit different. And so we want to be there to provide help and hope in those challenging times and in those exciting times for the next generation and the generation after that.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns. Today we're talking about when a loved one strays from faith and what to do about it. And it's an interesting conversation because we get so many questions and worries from parents about their kids who are doing this. It could be young adults, which I'm focusing on a little bit, but it could also be even younger kids. And, we'll see in a minute as we talk through this that it's not all bad to doubt, but we've got to work through those. So one of the most popular parables Jesus told was about a farmer who sowed and scattered his seeds. And the seeds fell on 4 types of soil. So the parable of the sower and the seed goes like this. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and he sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and he sat in it. And while all the people stood at the shore, he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. Exactly what we've been talking about. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it. Some fell along rocky places where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. Now, really, I'm catching these kind of thinking about deconstruction. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered away because there was no root. A lot of people in deconstruction have no roots. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a good crop. 160 30 times was 160 or 30 times what it was sown. So whoever has ears, Jesus said, let him hear. So if you have a loved one who is strayed, you may find them in this story, the path. Birds came and ate it. The seeds were taken from them. That takes place on the path. Birds came and stole it. Secondly is the rocky places. Didn't have much soil, sprang up quickly. You'll see that with people, but the soil was too shallow to take root, and they're gone. The third is thorns. The seed grew, but the thorns choked the very life of them out. Might have been distractions, busyness, addictions, social media, secret sins, you name it, okay? And then, of course, the good soil, and that's what we want, is the seed produced a good crop with a huge harvest. Now, in 3 of the 4 places, the seeds fell. They didn't make it, okay? And the seeds died before they could grow. That's deconstruction. What was the difference? They didn't have deep roots found in good soil, okay? With this in mind, let's talk about 5 things to do when someone is deconstructing. By the way, this is really positive because there's a lot of people who are now, they were, deconstructing and now they're coming back. Number 1 is maintain a climate of openness and grace. Be the person who gives them the most openness and the most grace. When you want to preach, lecture, judge, or shame, don't. Okay, just stay calm, stay engaged in their story. Remember, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Sometimes we panic. Lots of times we parents panic, but really this is stay in their story. Don't judge, don't shame, don't preach. Relationships thrive in an atmosphere of trust and compassion. And you can actually agree to disagree. You can be heartbroken, and you can still maintain an atmosphere of trust and compassion. The Apostle Paul gave some great advice when he wrote, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." That's found, by the way, in 1 John 3:18, a very important scripture in my life. In other words, we take a deep breath. We choose kindness over control. We bring grace to the relationship whenever you can. Okay, so number 2 is recognize that God is sovereign and that we are not sovereign. I challenge Christians to practice the spiritual discipline of offering what I call a prayer of relinquishment every day. Into your hands I commit my son. Into your hands I commit my daughter, my mom, my dad, my brother, who's ever deconstructing. Jesus did this. He said, "Not my will, Lord, but your will." So in essence, that's what we're doing, and it's an act of the will, and we have to do that regularly. Thirdly is remember this, doubters are accepted here. So if the person who has strayed in your life is living with some doubts about God, that's not necessarily always a bad thing. It can actually be the doorway to deeper belief and those deeper roots that we talked about. So you want to be a safe place for them to bring up doubts and questions. A couple I know asked me if I would be willing to meet with their son. Bright kid, fun-loving, and according to them, had a lot of questions and doubts about faith, and they were totally worried about it. So I met him for coffee. I think they thought I was going to try to straighten him out. And I said, "Hey, I understand you're dealing with some questions and doubts about your faith. I actually think that's probably a really good thing." He looked at me like I had just told him, I lived on the planet Mars. I mean, he was like, "What?" Because his parents weren't giving him that message. I said, "So what's up?" And he mentioned he was struggling with faith in God. And I paused and answered, "Well, that's some of the same questions," after he told me all of his stuff, "that I have. And I've been thinking about that for a long time." I believe unexpressed doubt is one of the most powerful destroyers of our faith. And so sometimes just asking questions, mouthing our doubts, saying our doubts out loud in a place where there's grace and acceptance and we can kind of dialogue, that's a good thing. It's not all bad. So don't suppress those questions. Doubters are welcome here. 4 is refuse to blame yourself. I mean, really good parents have kids who walk from God. They have to live with their own choices. And even then, what we've got to do is practice what we call tough love. Tough love is when you allow the consequences of some of their poor choices to live out, and you're showing now empathy and care and love. So again, you're becoming the safe person even when they've made these mistakes rather than alienating each other because you're now all down on them. It's a hard, fine line to walk, but you can love and show compassion and empathy even when you don't agree with them, and they know you don't agree with them, okay? And then 5thly is continue to influence them. You can have your heart breaking and still be their greatest support, like I said. Be there. Don't enable them, but being present in their life, it's really the only way that it matters where, it'll help them to come back. I now call that the power of being there. Younger children view your presence as a sign of caring and connectedness. Well, guess what? Older kids do too. So make sure you stay connected through compassion. Make sure you stay connected through empathy and kindness, whether or not they're following in your journey. Now, that's a big task. All 5 of those things aren't easy. I didn't say it'd be easy. they're kind of simple, if you would, in terms of thinking about it, but they're really hard to do, especially because there's relationships, there's drama, and there's negativity, and there's worry, and all that. So that's where we need a circle of support in our life to make sure that we can get through that process of still, showing love in the midst of some of those poor decisions that they're making, right? Let me tell you the story. One of my very best friends in life, I actually had breakfast with him today, of all things, is a man who he really is closer than a brother and has an adult daughter who took a drastic detour from her values and the values she was raised with. And he and his wife are two of the finest people I know. They honestly are two of the finest parents I know. They are consistent, loving, caring, filled with integrity, and an inspiration to the rest of us. However, their daughter challenged them. It's a big story, and the story's still being written because she's not totally perfect now. Well, she's beautiful. She's brilliant. I've known her since she was born. Fun, adventuresome. I mean, that's this kid, right? She also has some tough things that happened to her at a young age that her parents didn't know about, and she finally told them about those tough things that had happened to her when she was a young adult. And probably to kind of deal with some of that pain, she fell into a life of promiscuity. She fell into a life of alcohol and drug addiction. She walked away from God. Again, she wasn't a bad kid, but the drugs she was using to medicate her pain pulled her strongly in a direction that caused her to violate the family values, stray from their deep-rooted faith. And they are deep-rooted faith kind of people. So here's the deal. 5 years now, she's been sober. She's had a couple of bumps in the road, but they've been right there with her through that as well. She's still not where they had hoped she would be. She is still not where they had hoped she would be spiritually. Now, recently, they gave their daughter a necklace that had 3 words inscribed. And I love this: peace, joy, hope. That's what the 3 words are. They told her that their prayer was that she would have peace with her past, joy in today, and hope for tomorrow. Well, you know what? That's my prayer for you and my prayer for your loved one that's straight, that there would be peace for their past, joy in today, and hope for tomorrow. Now, that's also my prayer for you. I mentioned those 3 questions, and I don't want to move this podcast down the road without dealing with the 3 questions, because some of you went, whoa, those are the questions that are happening in my life. Not everybody, but many. How do I positively influence my child who doesn't believe in God anymore? I think you want to be generous with love. You want to lead with love. You want to practice kindness. I love what St. Francis of Assisi once said: preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. So in your life, preach the gospel. Stay in their story. You're in it for the long haul. I know it's messy, but stay in the mess, and God's okay with messes. Okay, that's what you do. I mean, it's not a magic. If you're looking for something, some magic wand to change them, it's not there. It's a process of changing, and you see people coming back all the time because they had their parents who loved them, prayed for them, and had patience with them. Okay, second question. My son and his wife forbid me to talk about God to my grandchildren. That's a tough one. I mean, I've got 4 grandchildren. If my kids ever did that, I would be so heartbroken and sad. And when they stayed with us this last weekend, they were talking about the grandchildren. We were told we could not take them to church. I get it. That's hard. You know what I'm going to tell you? Follow your kids' input and don't go behind their back. I know a lot of grandparents do that, but I don't think we do that. I think we can pray for them. So that's something actively we can pray. And don't just think that prayer is like, oh, well, pray. And, that's something that's not active. That's active. That's important. You're going to see change through prayer. Also, earn the right to be heard with your adult children, because you got to kind of reinvent the relationship with your adult children. So you're in it for the long haul. Okay. One day you may be able to invite those grandchildren to camp. Wait until one day they grow up and they ask you about your faith. Here's some good ideas. And we just did some podcasts on grandparenting. And one of the things that I really liked that I came out of it, both of the people I interviewed, Dudley Chauncey and Wayne Rice, talked about writing their faith story for the future generations. And so, let's pretend that you're not allowed to even talk about it, and you don't. Then that's probably the right thing to do. They know you're Christian. They know that you love God. They know that you're different. But I would suggest that you write the story, because at 18, you can do something very different. You can hand them your faith story, and they can read it, and they can begin to understand it. And if you don't make it till they're 18, then they'll read it, after you've passed on, and you're still passing on your faith to them in those ways. Be the kindest, most loving grandparent you can be. And traditionally, grandkids will want a relationship with you when they get older. So keep anything that you can open with the relationship. And if you may not be able to take them to church, but you can be generous with gifts. You can be generous with love. You can write them cards. When you do a card, stick some money in it or whatever. It doesn't have to be huge. You're not bribing them. But again, be that loving, safe person. They will then be drawn to your faith, and they'll know that you're living a life differently than their parents, frankly. Okay. And then that last question. How do I continue to love my daughter, who was a youth leader at our church, and now she's constantly talking trash on the church and seems to have violated every moral and value we ever taught her? I mean, that's not easy. And in some ways, the answer to all three of these questions is kind of the same. So stay in the story. We talked about that. Nobody said it would be easy. Agree to disagree with your daughter, but still be there for her. Throw her into disequilibrium without compromising your faith. And what I mean by that is still continue to show her love, still continue to give her support. Now, again, to do that, you can't do that on your own, and you're going to have a lot of anger and other issues. So you're going to have to find, and I use this phrase all the time. It's my new phrase. It's the phrase of the year for me, circle of support. So, yeah. Express your anger, express your frustration, express your doubts, express your problems with your adult kids if they're doing any of this stuff, especially this daughter who worked in the church and now she's talking trash on it. But you got to have a circle of support of people who go, we love you. It's not all about you. We're praying for you. We support you. We lift you up. That's the kind of thing you want to do. Okay, this is also a bit of an announcement, but on May 2nd, 2026 seems like a long time away, but it's going to come by fast. I actually will have a new book published, and it's called When Your Adult Child Strays, Trading Heartache for Hope. And so it comes out May 2nd, 2026. You can actually pre-order it on Amazon. That's always helpful to us because then it kind of gets Amazon already excited about it. And sometimes it comes out early and we'll send it to you. So if you order it from either from us or from Amazon, sometimes it does come early. You never know. But anyway, that's the story. So there's going to be a new book, and this new book I think is going to be very, very important. It'll go along with doing life with your adult children, but it'll take it farther where if you have a child who has strayed, we're going to help you a lot. We're going to talk about things like estrangement, this deconstruction thing. We're going to talk about what you do in the midst of it, how you keep the relationship there, and how you stay in the story. So some of the words that I'm beginning to use more and more, circle of support, stay in the story, those are all in that book. There you go. That's May 2nd. 2026. Okay, that is a wrap for today. Another Just Jim. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Thank you for watching this on the Homeward YouTube channel. If you do that, get to know Homeward. Go to homeward.com and subscribe to this podcast, like it, and let others know about it. And I'd be very grateful if you do that. And we just continue to get more listeners, more excitement, more people are letting us know that this is helping them. So if it does help you, let us know. You can go to homeward.com, go to info@homeward.com, and you can give us input. You can tell us what you'd like for another podcast. We are listening. We are watching. We are really hoping to do and be the kind of a podcast that builds some community with people like you. Until next time, I am Jim Burns, just Jim today.